Yeah.
And so what I was saying, Tom, is that I really think the imperial system is much, much more efficient and fun to use than the stupid metric system.
You know what? If you're a carpenter, everything works in quarters and halves. Eighth.
Or it works in centimeters. It works either way.
So wait a minute. It works either way, Tom. So why switch?
And one makes more sense than the other because you don't have to sit there and go, wait, how many feet? How many inches? You just know. It's all tens.
You just know.
By the way, how many fingers do you have, Roger?
How much what?
You have 12 fingers.
Do you have?
Do you?
You know, for certain people, they actually
metric
do.
System, with the metric system,
that's your defense.
Count on your fingers.
Some people have 12 fingers.
Your basis,
so just in case,
of
the tyranny of the 10-fingered is not going to stand.
What if you come from a race of 4-digit per limb person?
What if? What if you do?
Yeah.
In that case, I'm sure you can find a octillion system that works great for you.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, folks, if you're watching live or watching on video and you want more discussion of the metric system, be sure to support us on Patreon and get that Patreon exclusive RSS feed.
Or just can't do long division in your head. You go.
See, it's just irrational jabs from the anti-metric crowd. Oh,
irrational. It's perfectly rational.
No. It's objectively not.
Your knee-jerk ad hominem attacks mean nothing to me.
Your irrational numbers will not bring us down.
I'm going to go with the imaginary number system. I just measure everything as the square root of -1.
You got the imaginary part right.
Ha!
Laugh. I don't know.
Well, we didn't talk about food in the pre-show for the first time.
So there.
All right. All right. Well, I think I'm a good cubit and a half away from my screen, so I'm in position, ready to go. How long's a foot? It's a foot. You just look at your foot. That's actually taking that from Go 314 in the chat.
I'm really glad that that I found the one topic you're passionate about.
Yeah, real passionate about gravity too.
I think there are less controversies surrounding gravity than there are about the metric system. Although, I mean, according to Einstein, we're not so much pulled as
nature of gravity
is accelerating.
Yeah. All right, shall we get going?
Let's.
Here we go. You know who Daily Tech News Show is powered by? You. Thanks for supporting us at patreon.com/DTNS. This is the Daily Tech News for Tuesday, April 25th, 2017. I'm Tom Merritt. Joining me is Patrick Beja, live from, if I had to guess, France. You didn't tell me, but it looks like France.
Well, you know my environment well enough that now you can discern.
France. That tile is French. How's it going?
Yes,
man?
it's between the two election turns, so I'm here to vote.
Yeah, it's the intermezzo of elections, as they say in Italy, which is not having the election. But France,
it's the intermezzo, as we call it.
As you would say it. All right. Well, we are going to talk about a topic that Patrick and I have been kicking around for a few weeks, and we found
the metric system.
Yes, we're going to talk about the metric system. No, we're going to talk about, is Google the new Microsoft? And there are lots of parallels that Patrick has found that are pretty compelling here. And then I went back and found out how many times over the years people have raised this question and what their answers have been over the years. So we're going to talk about not only the similarities which are there, but also, is it finally more true now than it was before?
Yeah.
Let's start with a few tech things you should know about, though. Antivirus provider WebRoot accidentally began identifying files used by the Windows Insider Preview and some business apps as malicious. The definitions were up for about 13 minutes on Monday, but that was long enough to catch a bunch of WebRoot users. If you are in the process of dealing with this, there is a fix being worked on by WebRoot, and there's also some workaround instructions posted to the WebRoot community.
You know, in the minds of many people, Windows is a giant malicious piece of software.
13 minutes on yesterday, it was true for WebRoot. Yeah.
An unnamed multinational telecommunications company has outbid AT&T for straight path communications, holders of valuable spectrum for use in 5G networks. AT&T has 5 days to match or exceed the new offer. What will happen?
Millimeter wave spectrum. Who will get it? Is it Verizon? Are they the secret telecommunications company? I'm actually kind of fascinated by this. Nobody was really expecting this, I don't think, or at least not many people. AMD announced a new version of the Radeon Pro Duo. It combines two 14-nanometer Polaris GPUs, each with 16 gigabytes of RAM, so you get 32 gigs total. It does fewer teraflops than the older Radeon Pro, a drop to 11.45 versus the previous one, which is 16. But it's cheaper, cooler, and more power efficient, launching at the end of May for $999.
I'll take two.
Yeah, this is not for your video game machine. This is for professional use.
AT&T announced it will launch a combination of tech from LTE Advanced and LTE Advanced Pro in 20 cities by the end of the year.
Oh, cool.
AT&T, however, has decided to start calling this LTE service 5G Evolution.
Boo! Boo! Boo you, AT&T. And we knew it was coming. We knew someone would call an LTE 4G service 5G. And now we know who it is. AT&T.
I will join you in booing this decision.
Way to bankrupt a term. This is why people don't like to use 4G and 5G right here. This is why we can't have nice code words.
No, I agree. It's dumb. It's dumb. Yeah. It's a cheap short-term investment, because how are they going to call it big? And 5G Evolution is the worst way to name it. At least if they had called it like pre-5G or 5G mini or 5G
ready.
Yeah.
Pre-5G is not bad. Pre-5G, if you have to get 5G in there, I guess I could live with that. I just, 5G, it's 4G though. It's 4G.
Yeah, 5G Evolution, anything that is just 5G is going to seem less capable. So the others are now going to have to come up with other bigger terms to make it seem better, which it will be. So it's going to be like 5G Super, 5G Ultra, 5G Thanos, 5G Guardians of the Galaxy.
All right. Here's some more top stories. We got a couple of self-driving car stories. As of Tuesday, residents of Phoenix, Arizona could sign up for rides in Waymo's self-driving minivan for free. If you don't remember, Waymo is an Alphabet company. It's the spin-out of Google's self-driving car project. The Early Rider program will gather data on how people want to use autonomous cars. So you're basically beta testing for them. You can apply to be a rider on the service at waymo.com/apply. Applicants will be selected based on how they want to use the service. One big perk is like, hey, I want to use it for all of my transportation needs. That might get you to the front of the line. A human will be inside of each car behind the wheel, but they're going to try to let the cars operate as autonomously as possible. Meanwhile, Amber Mobility announced it will provide autonomous vehicles for use by customers of its business-to-business car sharing service in Eindhoven, Netherlands by mid-2018. After Eindhoven, Helmond will get it next, and then the rest of the European peninsula is to follow. Amber is partnering with TomTom for mapping, NVIDIA for image and sensor data, Microsoft for the cloud and AI part, and the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research for the autonomous vehicle software itself. Just more and more of these launching every day, Patrick.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, because what we've started seeing a few months ago, I guess, is that they are actually starting to get in the very early stages of industrial production. This is not quite the research and development stages where you test it on a track, and it's still not a fully launched product, but we're getting very close to it. And it might, turn out that this is not efficient enough and they have to fold things, to pull it back a little bit. But we are seeing like actual, and the really interesting thing is that this is almost commonplace now. right?
Yeah.
Some company is getting them into a specific neighborhood for a specific kind of rides, but it's not uncommon at all.
Yeah.
And had you told me 5 years ago we're going to get this in 5 years, I would have told you you are crazy. So
there are projects in Singapore, in the UK, all over the place. Now the Netherlands. The thing to remember, though, and this is what not skeptics, but people who are saying, "Hold on, yes, these are assistants. They can drive themselves under certain conditions." But remember, Arizona doesn't have snow. I don't know what the Netherlands service is going to look like. It's not till mid 2018, and people who are saying that this is overhype point out you still always have a human in here. We are far away, they say, from systems that don't require humans. And that's when it becomes revolutionary, is when you don't need a person to watch over the system at all. So when we get the first of those systems that are not closed track, we have a couple of shuttles that are no humans involved, but they're on closed tracks. When we get the first that doesn't require a closed track, that the public can ride with nobody else in there, that's the next big step for self-driving cars.
And I think that's all very well understood. And some people are taking it a little bit out of context for sure.
Sure.
But I think even with all of the caveats in place and all of the, being careful about what it means, I think it's still impressive. And we wouldn't have thought it would go as far in that little time.
So, I mean, who knows? I think it will be quite a while before we have just general road service without human drivers allowed inside, for regulatory as well as technological reasons. But maybe I'll be wrong about that too, because 5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought we'd have this many of these, like you said.
Yeah. And just to finish up on this, even if we start getting them in specific conditions and in specific places, it's still something,
Something,
yeah. All right. The European Parliament members voted on Tuesday to ban online retailers from blocking EU citizens from accessing content based on where they live, and expanded the proposed law to include copyright-protected content such as music, games, software, and ebooks from companies like Spotify and Apple.
So they're trying to do what we have somewhat naturally in the United States. There's no law about it. It's just Netflix is available anywhere in the US because people don't have to show a passport to cross the borders. And in the EU, they're like, hey, Schengen zone, you don't have to show a passport to cross the border most of the time. In Europe either. Why should you be banned from watching your German Netflix when you're traveling to France? In fact, anybody should be able to buy the service and use it anywhere within Europe. So I think this is doing by legislation what could happen a long time from now, naturally, if the EU got closer and closer to a political union. So I understand why the companies are like, hey, we don't like this because we have these natural regions and they still exist. But I understand why consumers are like, yes, please. I don't want to have to think about where I am when I'm using my services.
Yeah, and this is mainly at the time being so that you can just keep using your German Netflix when you're outside Germany and Europe, meaning you should still be able to access that, but maybe not necessarily unify the entirety of the offerings in a single market, because we still have different rights in different places and they're negotiated differently. But it does beg many questions, like can you access this type of service from here? You should be able to subscribe to it from anywhere as well, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And the copyright holders and the content distribution networks are very, very, very much against it, which is understandable. But if you want to be the most consumer friendly, and we know what happens when you're not, wink, wink, piracy, then this, needs to catch up with the realities of the internet. And it should have, if I'm being like, that's my personal opinion, but should have caught up a while ago. But there are very powerful companies in place that are fighting tooth and nail against it. So even that, which is a very first step, is so very quickly, to give you an example, we have a windowing of formats in France for cinema. And movies don't come out to video subscription services, on-demand video subscription services, until 36 months after their release at the theater. So movies don't come to Netflix until 3 years after they've come out to the movies. And that is a very long time to wait to get your movie. So I mean, other countries have different rules, and that could topple them. So it is complicated.
Yeah, I could go and sign up for the Croatian Netflix, for instance, because maybe it
has
shorter.
more of the
yeah exactly. Everybody's got announcements about improving news today. Google announced Project Owl, which takes into account ratings by human reviewers in search results, not determining them by them, but adding it to the mix. Also gives you a way to report problems if you see autocomplete completing something that doesn't look right to you, or featured snippets, those little snippets that you get at the top of search results that maybe say something that you're like, that's not quite right. You now have links that you can report those. Facebook is testing showing you related articles and links to fact checkers in its related articles before you read a topic. So before you click, it will say, hey, there's also these other articles about a similar issue. And the third of the news efforts is led by Wikipedia co-founder Jimmy Wales. Wiki Tribune will allow anyone to participate, but a paid staff of journalists will edit contributions and decide what gets published. So it's not all volunteer like Wikipedia. Wiki Tribune staff will also write original articles, and they'll take into account the wishes of crowdfunders on what they cover. The site will not take advertising. Advisors to Wiki Tribune include Guy Kawasaki, Lawrence Lessig, Jeff Jarvis, and Lily Cole.
I am, very not enthusiastic. I'm happy that everyone is worried about this whole thing. Obviously, we've seen in the past year or so that this is a real problem, and I'm excited to see all of those being tested. I think the Facebook one might be pushing the annoyance factor a little bit too far. You're clicking on something.
I feel like that's the least intrusive of these, because it just says as it brings up a link, here are some related links. That seems just kind of like an added benefit to me. Like, oh, it's good to know that I see related links on lots of stuff all the time.
Well, so maybe I misunderstood how it works. Isn't it that when you click on it, it says, hold on just a second, there's also this that you might be interested in?
Good question. I don't know that that's the way it works.
So, okay, well, if it's put like on the side or differently suggested reading, then it probably works. And thinking about it, that might be the way it is implemented. But either way, the one that I'm the most interested in is Jimmy Wales' initiative, because it sounds crazy and it sounds like it shouldn't really work. But, that could also describe Wikipedia. And Wikipedia works very well with its challenges, but it is an invaluable resource for the world, really, for a lot of areas. So I would be curious to see how it works out and whether or not it can create a source that is trusted enough by enough people that it can be pointed to as a source of record, which seems to be there are very few sources of record or newspapers of record that everyone agrees is reliable. So yeah, I'm wondering if that could
tried this before. As far back as 2008, there have been efforts to say we're going to make an independent, non-advertising supported news organization, and they've all flopped. They just don't get readership. They don't get support. They don't get funding. So a lot of people are looking at this saying, well, yeah, it's got Jimmy Wales, but here we go again. I would say this is probably the best attempt to improve journalism. Going with Project Owl and giving people ways to report. Google itself admits, like, we didn't think this was as much of a problem, but everybody's crying to high heaven, so we decided to implement this. It's not a bad thing. I think the Facebook thing is just good because it gives you more information. And like you say, as long as it's not intrusive and getting in the way of your clicks, I think it's great. But Wiki Tribune is like, hey, let's create a news organization where we all try to double check each other's facts, where the crowd can look at it and say, hold on, wait a minute. Let's make sure we have as good quality of an article on this as possible. I think that's an admirable way to go about it, because you're not trying to argue what's fake news and what isn't. You're creating the best possible journalism. Can it succeed where others have failed is a matter of whether it can get enough interest. And I think the things in Wiki Tribune's favor are this issue is more top of mind now than it has ever been before. And it's got Jimmy Wales' name attached to it. So a lot of people who are fans of Wikipedia and fans of that model may be willing to participate. I think if it has a failing, it's that its advisors are going to all be seen as liberal. And so conservatives may not get behind it. And if you don't get all perspectives behind it, it's not going to work.
Well, I wouldn't say it's not going to work. I think it has a little bit more challenges ahead of it. But I don't think, the getting the consensus from everyone wouldn't happen really anyway. I don't think everyone would say yes, this is fine. So you have to do the best you can. But either way, the reason why I think it is more likely to succeed now is, as you said, people are talking about it a lot more. There is a feel for a need for better reporting everywhere. So the funding might follow, and the crowdfunding in this case might follow. So I think this could work. And of course, Jimmy Wales, Wikipedia, he has experience in those kinds of things.
I think they need some more balanced advisors. I love the 4 that they have are great, but I think they need a few other perspectives as well.
Yeah, I guess I agree. I just think there are always going to be people on both sides that are going to say, this is too on that side.
Well, yeah, no matter what they do, there's going to be people saying that. That's a very good point.
And in the context of the French election right now, which is very split, I can tell you I'm experiencing some of this from every side all the time. Apple has told its affiliates that it will cut commissions for referring people to buy apps and in-app purchases from 7% to 2.5%. The change does not affect iTunes and iBooks content.
So why did this catch your eye in particular, Patrick? I'm curious. It is interesting that they're cutting funding basically for referrals. I don't know that any particular outlet actually, makes its living off these referrals, but it can make up a chunk.
And the reason I wanted to talk about it with you is that I don't understand it. It's somewhat uncharacteristic from Apple because they're doing it within like a week. They didn't give any lead time to anyone to sort of realize that this was going to happen and sort of, balance for it. And then a move like this is usually made to try and, the way I look at it is to try and shape the way people use the services. In this case, it's discouraging people from actually linking with affiliate links to their content, their app content, and their digital content. And I'm not sure why they would want to discourage, beyond the fact that they're going to give out less money for those things and keep more money for themselves.
Maybe gaming the system, and this is a blunt way to get about it. That's the only thing I could think of.
But how would you game this? Like there were links that people didn't know included referrals, or that we would know about it. I think
not necessarily. Not necessarily. There could be some program out there that's under the radar. There's spam programs out there all the time that people aren't aware of. So I could totally believe that it could happen. It doesn't seem like the best way to go about addressing it. If it was, though, is to just cut everybody's referral. And maybe that would be an Apple tends to use blood instruments because they're like, wow, this isn't how we make our money anyway. So boom, we cut it, but only giving people till May 1st. I mean, that's not even a week.
Yeah. So it is somewhat of a strange move. There probably isn't anything else, behind this, but it's strange enough that it got me to wonder. And
if anybody's got a good theory, send it to us. feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. And don't forget, folks, if you want to get all the tech headlines each day, if you're having a hard time just keeping up on the basics, you're like, I just need to keep up on what's actually happening. And Daily Tech News Show is here to help you understand it. But if you just want 5 minutes of what's happening, subscribe to dailytechheadlines.com. All right, folks. Is Google the new Microsoft? I was able to find an article going back at May 2nd, 2005, where Bill Gates is quoted as saying about Google, because they are a software company, quote, they are more like us than anyone else we have ever competed with. So these comparisons have been going for a while. And in my historical survey, they tend to shift from in the early days being Google is like Microsoft because it is going to have a challenge maintaining its dominance because there's not enough lock-in. Anybody can switch their search service to something else, and they're relying on one thing. To in the middle and then towards the modern day, it's Google is like Microsoft because they have antitrust concerns. They have too much of the marketplace. Lock-in apparently wasn't a problem. And they are competing in the operating system world with Apple. There's also other comparisons here. I think now more than ever, the biggest one that is true throughout all of the historical articles that I looked at is the worry that Google is not innovating like it used to, especially in its main area, in its Google area of search and Android. So is this another time where like, well, yeah, it's the same, but they're not going to end up the same as Microsoft and hit that stagnation, that plateau that started to happen in the 90s for Microsoft, and they just now seem to be breaking out of? Or are they on that same path? Patrick, do you have thoughts on this? Where do you think Google stands in comparison to Microsoft these days?
Yeah, so I think the comparison is very easy to make, and it's almost too easy to say, oh, well, they're really big in one area and Microsoft is really big in another area, so basically they're the same. So I would say that all of those brilliant writers that you dug up are all wrong and they didn't get it. However, we on the Daily Tech News Show do get it. And no, anyway, so the reason I was thinking about this is akin to some of the others, but what makes them very similar, in my opinion, is that more and more Google has become less innovative, not on its core business, but on the other products that it can offer. And it relies entirely, revenue-wise, on its one core business, which is search/advertising, right? Because its two biggest products are web search and YouTube. Both of them are search engines with ads attached to it. You could argue Android is a very big business for them, but I'm not sure exactly.
Android serves to bring in advertising, so
exactly.
It's
Android as itself is not generating revenue.
If you had to pick a third for them, it would be G Suite. It would be the enterprise level app services that they provide. It's certainly not on the scale of search or ads, though.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of a side thing. And they have side things. It's not like they don't. You know, they have Chromebooks, which might not bring in a lot of money. They have the photos business. They have Maps, which again is search and advertising. But and Microsoft, of course, has Windows, and it tried to do a lot of other things, but it didn't quite succeed to the level to which Windows did. Of course, they have Office. They've done a number of things, the Xbox, the Surface, more recently, even phones here and there. Do you remember the Kin? That was a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
Kin.
Oh, yeah.
But really, I think that has the comparison has become really stark in the past 2-3 years, maybe, when Google started becoming, when they switched to Alphabet and started folding down on the crazy research things.
Spinning out, I guess, maybe. Yeah.
But even
putting Nest in its other place, putting self-driving cars in its other place, putting the X projects in its own place, putting health in another place, and focusing Google. And
folding operations on a number of other crazy moonshots. There are a number of them which they said, all right, this is not working. It's not. Let's focus on stuff that we're serious about.
When you say moonshots, I think of the self-driving car type stuff, but you're talking about Wave and things like that.
Well, those are other things, which is another element of the whole thought process, which is, I think, confidence in Google as a forward-thinking company that will, offer different kinds of product. That confidence is waning because of Wave. And what was the other one? Buzz, was it?
Yeah, Google Buzz. Well, Google Plus. Google Plus at this point.
It's basically dead. And not dead. I'm going to get some emails. I mean, it's
not as many as you used to, though. I think people have started to realize, Google Plus may have its adherents these days, but it's certainly, you wouldn't call it a success when you look at things like Facebook or even Twitter.
And I think the way we look at Google's product, new things when they launch, we mentioned this a couple of times, they launch something, the first thing you go to is not, wow, this could be cool. It's, oh, I'd better not invest myself too much in this because we don't know how long it's going to be around.
Well, like Messenger, like Allo and Duo, is their attempt to capture a space that they aren't in, which is messaging. Even though they're in that space with Hangouts and this and that, they keep shifting. And so you're like, well, should I get into Allo? Because I was into Hangouts, and then they just tore that apart.
They're kind of losing a little bit of confidence in a lot of, side areas. And so what remains is the search business, which is rock solid. They've kept a lead in that for a very long time, and it's arguably one of the, well, it is, I would say, the best in the business. Whether or not you want them to use your personal information is another matter, but from a technical standpoint, it really gives fantastic answers. And that reminds me as a structural build of Microsoft very much. And Microsoft, as you said, has until very recently couldn't get out of that one business. So the gesticulations in trying to bring in other areas of expertise from Microsoft, the unsuccessful gesticulations, remind me a lot of what we've seen from Google in the past few years. And I don't know if that's a good thing.
Here's one key difference between what Microsoft did at its same comparable stage and what Google has done, that I think may mean it doesn't matter if Google is innovating in that way. Maybe it doesn't matter if Google's come up with some crazy awesome product recently. Google has the same problem that Microsoft has, in that anytime it ventures too far from its core product, it risks that product, right? So if it comes up with great Pixel phones, it's antagonizing the other parts of the platform, the HTCs and LGs that can barely make enough money on phones these days. And it's got to carefully balance that. But what Google did is created Alphabet. And they said, you know what? We're going to take all of our R&D stuff, all of our big bets, our other bets, and we're going to put them in other companies. We're going to be a company that creates companies. And Google is just going to be one of those companies. And for a while, it will seem like the only company worth paying attention to because it makes so much money. But eventually one of these other bets will catch on. Maybe it's Waymo. Maybe Nest gets revitalized. Maybe the health stuff really starts to take off. And that is what Google has done instead of acquiring companies. Facebook has done a similar thing by acquiring Oculus, right? And acquiring WhatsApp. What Google said was, we already have the companies. They're inside Google. Let's move them out of Google so that we're not confusing the issue, and let Google be Google. Google may, in their eyes, be doomed to commoditization. Yes, it will always be a very strong advertising company, but it may not be the source of innovation. Let's have Alphabet X and all of these other companies be our hedge against the future, in which case, if Google hits that stagnation point, they've got other businesses to pick up the slack.
That's a big if, though. It's
a gamble, yeah.
It means, whether or not these new incredible products come out of some department in Microsoft or the company under the umbrella of Alphabet. I understand the distinction, but I still think it's kind of the same issue. Yes, it's different people, but you have 1 million startups in Silicon Valley and only a handful manage to create something new and interesting every year. I mean, yes, maybe maybe Alphabet is going to manage to do this, but what if they do? I mean, until now, I don't think they've done some super interesting things, but I don't think they've quite managed to do this. And we're reaching a time in the life of Google now, which is, 15, 20 years old, where I'm sorry?
More.
Is it more? Wait,
yeah.
What year is this?
In 99.
There you go. So it's not even 20 years old.
More than 15. Yeah.
Yeah, more than 15. Yeah, but so we're reaching a time where you can't really say, well, they're a super young company, they're just starting out.
Nobody's saying that.
Exactly. And Microsoft, when it was 20 years old, was kind of in a somewhat similar
they were riding high. They were Windows 95ing it, 98ing it, but they weren't innovating, right? After Windows 95 and 98, it was incremental. And it wasn't until recently that they had a real change of ethos, where they said, you know what? We can threaten Windows. We can put things on other platforms that aren't Windows. And that was Satya Nadella. I think that Google will have to reach that point at some time, but maybe it's wise to just let them ride the coattails until they need a Satya Nadella at some point. And Alphabet has these other bets that may come to maturity. Like I said, it's a gamble, but it's not a bad gamble. And they certainly have enough cash to maybe acquire a company or two down the road.
And I think you're very right in pointing out the reorganization as Alphabet, because one of the key differences between the two companies was that Microsoft was incredibly, obsessively protective of Windows. Even though Google, well, Alphabet is relying immensely on Google, it seems like if only through that reorganization, they're willing to get Google to be threatened a little bit more, as long as it's, by them. So that is, you're right, a key difference. It hasn't happened yet though. And you were mentioning Facebook. Facebook now has a number of different products that are all extremely successful in their own right. Google still isn't in that
Outside
place
of
yet.
Google, in the Alphabet.
Alphabet.
But they're also much bigger bets in the most part than Oculus. So it remains to be seen. Alphabet's only a little more than a year old. So there are some differences, but it is that same challenge. IBM had the same challenge and continues to have the same challenge of how do you take a behemoth of a company that is that big, and figure out how to innovate as you go along.
And just to finish up, to be honest, there is nothing really threatening Google's position right now. Potentially, virtual assistants could short circuit the search engine at some point in the future, but we're not there yet. So,
and Google is
well placed
right in the
there.
game on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, thanks to everybody who participates in our subreddit. You can submit stories and vote on them at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. Quick messages of the day. Brendan Lee in Columbia, South Carolina pointed out, hey, remember when Chrome and lots of other browsers started to block pop-up ads back in the day? There was a little controversy from advertisers at the time, but nobody thinks about it anymore. The proposed ad standards are definitely moving the goalpost of what's acceptable for ads, but he's like, maybe it's no different than that. Also, Anas from Syria said, Tom mentioned it might be harder to manipulate video and mislead people, but you might have to think about that again. He points to an article on The Verge about facial transfer videos, where a team of researchers created a system that can use an actor's facial expressions to manipulate a target's facial expressions in real time. And then we got another email from Dave Southard in Madison, wondering if one of the reasons you constrain the wake word is to stop a SQL injection-like attack. He says, look, if anybody can change the wake word, you could change the wake word to issue some sort of buffer overflow command. He's like, to be honest, I'm not sure how one would perform that feat, but it does at least make me think of this as a vector to hacking your device and perhaps your account. And I know from my point of view, it's definitely one I want to constrain. So interesting thoughts from you folks. Keep them coming. Feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com. Thank you, Patrick Beja. As always, my friend, where can folks find more of what you're doing?
I would suggest people go to, listen, if you speak French, or if you are trying to revive your high school French, why don't you go listen to shows in French about what other than tech news or gaming news? You can go to FrenchSpin.com and check out two podcasts I produce, Le Rendez-vous Tech and Le Rendez-vous Jeu, which discuss news from the tech world and the gaming news. You'd be
surprised if you know a little French how much of the show you'll understand, because you'll know a lot of the words like Facebook, Microsoft. Like seriously, that context helps. You're like, oh, I know I know the story they're talking about now, and it starts to help your comprehension. So go check it out. Hey, thanks to everybody who gives a little value back for the value they get from the show, including Gail, Alex Metzler, Gene Mills, and many more at patreon.com/DTNS. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. We're live Monday through Friday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 2030 UTC at alphageekradio.com and diamondclub.tv. And our website is dailytechnewsshow.com. Back tomorrow with Scott Johnson. See you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Beautiful.
Very nice.
Good show. What should we call it?
Unsuccessful gesticulations. I like that one.
That is good.
There is also Googling pains.
Google's awkward teen phase. That's funny. This is why we can't have nice code words. Online access for you and me. Roger is trying to talk, but his mute will not work. He'll come back. He'll be back.
You can tell me how to internet.
You
can tell me.
4-H was taken.
Googly eyes of empire.
Hey, you're back.
WebRoot is rooted for just a Googie. Google embraces and extends MS. Google gambles.
Which one are you excited about, Roger?
Googling pains.
Googling pains?
It's a good one.
Like growing pains?
Yeah.
Well, depends. If you need to explain it, then
it could mean that you're just looking up pain. I'm Googling my pains.
Wait, let's see what happens if. So I've been using Quant. Do you know Quant?
Anti-Quampadu?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I don't know Quant.
Quant is a search engine from France that does. It's kind of like DuckDuckGo.
Okay.
It doesn't track you in any way.
So what are you gonna do with it?
So I've been using it for like 2 months.
Yeah.
And they have a very handy option where you go !G and then put a search term and it Googles it. And because they know, it's like people still use Google.
Sure.
And I'm comparing search results very often between the two. And I have to admit, Google is usually a lot more precise, a lot more topical,
more relevant.
Yeah.
It ain't perfect, but it's still maybe the best.
Yeah, compared to what I'm getting, which I want to use Quant because I want to see what happens with a search engine that is not tracking you everywhere, and that's a little bit of a. I'm still using it.
Microsoft Part 2, Electric Googaloo.
Ooh, all right. I think we have a winner.
At the risk of using the Electric Boogaloo device too many times, is pretty good.
Yeah.
Roger, you have no opinion.
Yeah, sure.
Well,
I think that's the third time, I think.
Oh.
That I remember since last year that we've used some sort of Electric Boogaloo.
Well, it becomes a thing. It's a fun. Then you can start, selling T-shirts with references to that, and like
our other options are unsuccessful gesticulations and Google's awkward teen phase.
Googling pains. That's fine. That's fine. Electric Googaloo.
Electric Googaloo. All right.
It would probably make more sense if it was Electric Googaloo Microsoft Part 2.
Well, no. That's not how the title of the film goes, though, right?
Yeah.
What? Okay.
What is it? I can't think of the actual film.
Ooh. There's
no, it's Breakin' 2.
Breakin'.
There's a new intro movie for Heroes of the Storm. I haven't seen this. Okay,
Heroes
I'm
of the
gonna
Storm
check out and watch it.
Why can't Heroes of the Storm be just an FPS?
Well, you should play
MOBAs.
Overwatch.
Because they have an FPS. Exactly.
Okay, I can't hear you very well.
Oh, Patrick's gone.
I'm not gone.
He's gone into the world of watching intro videos. Do we have to be quiet while he listens? He seems enraptured.
It's kind of like The Ring.
I can see the video playing across his face. It's like the ring. He said. I wonder if he did you mean it? Did you mean it? Breaking to not breaking, breaking.
Well, yeah, okay. Breaking.
No, I started to say breaking, and I was catching myself.
Breaking 2.
Breaking.
The first movie is better, I still think.
Breaking 1.
Breaking.
No electricity. Breaking 1. Analog. Boogaloo. What does an analog boogaloo look like?
Elvis
Perhaps.
with the hips.
I didn't know that. The second Mystery Science Theater 3000 convention was called Festorama 2 Electric Boogaloo. They misspelled it in the early promos and just kept the spelling.
Aaron's spelling.
Error in spelling. Yeah. Is that still going on?
What?
The Heroes thing?
Maybe it's a long trailer.
Yes,
Well,
it was
what's your
2 minutes and 20 seconds.
All right. And
so Diva is a new character in Heroes. And Genji is having a really hard time fighting Diablo on Hanamura.
aha. So you're not worried about spoilers in Heroes.
No, video games usually I'm a little bit less, except if they're really, really story-based. But video games, Heroes, it's not like there's no story to spoil there.
Totally.
It's just a Bazooka Joe comic that wraps the game together.
The what?
Bazooka Joe comics. Remember Bazooka Joe chewing gum? They're really cheap.
I have no idea what that is.
Really cheap chewing gum, but it's wrapped in a
US
wrapper. It's a little comic.
Oh, okay. Do you know? Do you have the Carambar candy? You know what that is?
I only do you have a picture of it? I might recognize it.
It's basically bars of hard caramel, and the wrapper has jokes on it, and they're really, really bad jokes that everyone knows from their childhood as
Same
the
idea.
most terrible jokes.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe they should put dad jokes on there too.
It's the Bazooka Joe comics of France.
Basically.
Bazooka Jacques.
Joe is Joseph, right? So that would be Bazooka Joseph.
It's Joseph. Well, yeah, but Jacques becomes a more common, right?
I suppose.
Joe is just a common name.
Oh, right. Well, then, in that sense,
yeah.
I don't know, maybe Pierre, but
Bazooka Pierre is even better. Bazooka Pierre.
No, you did not just me.
I did for Bazooka Pierre. I sure did.
Is that borderline offensive?
It's getting there a little bit, borderline. But
I mean, Bazooka Pierre is not. It's not a serious character in my imagination. So
there is no justification for going in.
All right,
the worst thing is that sounds nothing like anything French people say.
That's why I'm assuming Bazooka Pierre is just a caricature that has no relation to any real person either.
I don't know. I think Bazooka Pierre could be a cool kind of.
Bazooka Joe doesn't have any relation to a real American, so.
I mean, yeah.
Bazooka Joe is always well, golly gee whiz. So I figured the equivalent.
Jolly
right.
Sacre bleu.
Sacre bleu. Yeah, that could work. That could work. Which sacre bleu I can get that, but is
it's just it's a bridge too far. All right, fine.
Do you find Pepe Le Pew, the cartoon and the Looney Tunes cartoon, to be borderline offensive?
Yeah. It's not, Pepe Le Pew but it's kind of old. Like no one actually does Pepe Le Pew things anymore. So, but Hon comes out all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like
It's a battle you're still fighting. Is what you're saying.
I would say a mime in sailor's outfit, like the striped thing with a beret, is to the level of
what you'll take.
It's like
Yeah.
no, there are no mimes. I don't know where that thing came from. Actually, it would be
Oh, the
interesting.
60s. It was country was littered with mimes.
Was it?
Sure. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's where it comes from, the 60s, though. It's a very 60s thing. You see it in film and stuff.
Yeah, maybe there was like
there
one.
is that. I'm starting to remember something. Like I think there might have been a French film about a mime. And so it had nothing to do with actual like the French countryside being covered in mimes, but there was that one film.
I think
people knew that one film.
I think it was there was that Gidget Goes to Europe or Paris or something, one of those movies.
Yeah,
So
and then
maybe-
Marcel Marceau was in it or something, maybe.
And there was just a bunch of like very kind of outlandish, cartoony, ethnic stirs.
Well, and your love of Jerry Lewis, obviously, is.
Yes,
I'm trying to find the American equivalent
of
to
Jerry Lewis.
No, of the the thing we would be doing, which has no.
Is it?
But the thing is, yeehaw actually exists in the U.S. Yes, it's very caricatural.
No, it doesn't.
It is in your culture to caricature.
Unironically, ever.
Yes.
Yeah, but
some
it was
people
the
say
name.
Okay, wait a second.
But you're saying no one in France
in
ever
France,
says, okay, all right.
It comes out of nowhere. It doesn't exist anywhere.
Well, golly gee whiz probably is pretty close.
Well,
but again, that existed at some point. At some point, people did say golly or gee whiz.
Yeehaw.
Gee whiz, Grandpa.
See? How about see?
Yeah, but that's
It's the
more of a
coppers,
that's more of a
see?
that's more of a mobster thing.
That's us.
Isn't
We're
it?
all mobsters. We're all mobster cowboys in the eyes of the world.
Yes, whether it's a fedora or a 10-gallon hat.
We're wearing some kind of funny hat. And we're running around with guns.
All right.
Don't
Well,
run with the gun.
on that note,
Yes, I think we should go. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Hope you had a good time. We'll be back tomorrow with Scott Johns.
ho ho ho.